first thing for me to say is thank you very much for the invitation to come and talk tonight. Archaeological work takes a tremendous amount of time. So from when we finish an excavation to disseminating the information is often many, many years indeed. So it's great to come and give people a bit of information, at least preliminary analysis of what it is we've found. So tonight I'm going to be talking about an area I'm not particularly familiar with over in the East End of London. I've tended to stay much more in the city or south of the river during most of my career. However, I've worked near here in the past. So we're going to be talking about this site, which is just about here. We are just around here now. So we're actually very close to where we're sitting now. And the site on Whitechapel High Street, south end of Brick Lane. So literally 5 minutes walk from Aldgate, pretty much from where we are there. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the archaeology of the area, which is, well, I mean, you're a knowledgeable audience, so I'm sure plenty of you do know what I'm about to tell you. But for those who don't, we're on the east side of the site's on the east side of the Roman city, and the red line you can see is roughly the city wall, and you can see obviously that the modern street pattern in certain areas still follows that to this very day. The purple line, which you can see, is the rough course of the Roman road, which came out of Aldgate and continues on through Bow in East London, Chelmsford, and all the way to Colchester eventually. So obviously we're in an area which has quite high potential for Roman archaeology, if not for the city itself. There are burials outside the bounds of the city, and indeed a lot of the east side of London is full of these Roman burial grounds. So Aldgate is just inside the blue circle. So that's the entrance to both the Roman and medieval city. And then finally with this green circle down, which hopefully we can see down here. I'll go back. Apologies. That is the rough location of the Roman bathhouse, which is located in Shadwell. So there's plenty of Roman archaeology, both immediately to the west and to the south of where we are, which might have led us to believe that we were going to find plenty of Roman archaeology where we were, but we didn't. And one of the reasons we didn't is that a vast area of the site had been used for sand and gravel quarrying in medieval and Tudor periods particularly. So if there had been a great deal of Roman archaeology on the site at one point, by the time we got there, it wasn't. Somebody dug it all up. Now, we did find a few Roman features, and hopefully you can see just around here is the edge of a large quarry pit, which has been cut into the sand and gravel. This is a Roman feature, but it's one of the very few which we did find, and it's located in the extreme southern part of the site, which is closest to the Roman road. Indeed, these quarries might have been used to surface the road. That's a very common thing. Obviously, you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to transport materials, particularly if you've got an ox and cart rather than mechanised means, which we have today. So, as I've said, there isn't a great deal in terms of Roman archaeology on the site. Not much survived due to the quarrying, but one of the things it did was what appeared as this rather curious feature, where you can just see an outline here as it was first exposed, and this is a bit of fired clay, and then when we dig it out, it turns into this feature here, and hopefully you can see there's quite a distinctive fire clay lining around the outside. We didn't find anything in terms of residue from glass making, metalworking, anything like that. So it doesn't appear to be an industrial feature, so hence the interpretation as a small kind of tandoori oven. And this dates to 270, 400 AD, something like that. Again, this was found in the southern part of the site, but further north than this, we found very few Roman features indeed. We did pick up residual Roman finds, but even the quantity of those went down further north. We went away from the main Roman road. So here we are looking at the Agas map of 1570. The red circle shows you roughly where the site was. So we've got developed street frontages along Whitechapel High Street to the south, and on both sides of Brick Lane, close to where we are. I love this map; it's fantastic. It's when you look at the scale of things, it's kind of, we've got cows up the top. That's a house down there. But one of the things that is missing from this map is the church, St Mary's Church, which is actually located down on the south side of the road here. And it should have been on this map because the church was there in 1329, supposedly, when it was completed. But apparently, for reasons which are beyond me, it never actually appeared. So Aldgate is in the blue circle over on the left-hand side of the screen as you were looking at it, and you can see that is part of the medieval wall down there. So a curious projection by the Agas map, but anyway, as you can see, most of the area is still open ground, not much happening, according to the map, by that period. However, by the time we get to Morgan's map of 1682, unfortunately, some of my slide has disappeared off the edge of our presentation here. Sites over here, that is an alleyway called Bell Lane, Osborne Street, Brick Lane, it's just off the left side there. And there's a little L-shaped alleyway, which runs through the south and middle part of the site, which we'll have another look at that later and see how that affects what it is we found. Down here, we have got St Mary's Church on this map, which is nice, because it was there, it always had been there. And because of the excavation, as I say, we found a massive quarry, it's huge. So the sand and gravel is being extracted from the site, and quite possibly to cover the roads, could also be used as the finer grades of it for making mortar for building. And obviously, there being a large medieval church on the south side of the main road, that would be an obvious place to, an obvious use for that material. One of the things we found when we were digging out these quarry pits was this tremendous amount of butchery waste, and absolutely huge quantities. I've never seen this much animal bone anywhere or an excavation in my whole career. And that obviously mostly came in smaller pieces. In this case, we've got kind of half a sheep, which somebody's thrown in the bottom of the pit. And to give you some idea how large these things are, we've got a very large Portuguese gentleman standing there. He's about 6'4". So that gives you a better idea, maybe, than half a metre scale in the base of the hole. But these things they're cutting into each other, so they're all over the place. As I was saying, why did people get the sand and gravel? Probably for building, surfacing the roads. And you can see through this section cut through a load of these intercutting pits that there is a very, very large amount of animal bone indeed. And here's one of our archaeologists sorting his finds out. As most of you are probably aware, these are the things which we usually put our finds in clear plastic bags. But the size, the amount of stuff we were bringing out meant that gave up on that and went for rubble sacks as containers instead. But that did present us with a problem. The area we were working in was at the rear of a standing building, which is, or was, a textile factory built in the 1950s and early 1960s. That is now being converted as part of the hotel. So we had no vehicle access onto the site at all. So, and trying to push wheelbarrows around into, like, through an active building site wasn't a great idea either. But luckily, the people on the site had a very large crane, and they were quite happy to help us out. So this is a load of our animal bone and soil samples, environmental samples being taken off the site over the top of the standing building and down onto the road so that we could actually get it to our vehicle. Our sadly missed vehicle, which somebody stole from outside our office about 2 weeks ago. Anyway, that's an aside. So here's my friend Thomas, who's the crane supervisor, getting our bag of fines down, and now we've got a load of people out there, and we'll just hand all this stuff into the back of the van and get it taken away. So as I was saying, yeah, we have these very large pits. Around here, I think we can see that's the edge of one there. So there's sand and gravel, which is slumping back into this hole, which marks the edge. And when you see it here, it's a bit clearer. It's a bit of a wobbly line I've given you there, but for people who aren't used to looking at soil differences in the ground, which is how we determine things as archaeologists, that's a pretty good indication. And you can see with people in the picture just how big these features are. So these things are like, 5-6 meters across, a couple of meters deep. We weren't able to excavate them fully in many cases because they're just, they go beyond the health and safety measures which we're allowed to have today. And this is a feature we were just looking at after it's been partially excavated, and you can see the sand and gravel slumping down into this corner of the pit. These things date to, they're mainly late medieval, early Tudor. And a lot of people will think, well, that's really boring. You just found a load of, they're very large holes in the ground, which is true. And compared to some excavations, we haven't got a lot of horizontal stratigraphy, we haven't got a lot of nice Roman buildings, anything like that. But within the backfills of these features, there is a great deal of interest. So, for instance, we have these three fragments of a stove tile, which were found together, partially reconstructed. And then if we look at a complete example, we can see that bit there is exactly pretty much the same design as this. So it's the top of that pilaster, and then probably a coat of arms above it. These things are very exclusive indeed. If you can see the initials here and the royal crest, you can guess that you have to be quite well off to be able to afford one of these things. So they're very high status indeed. Stove tile is a bit of a misnomer because when you actually look at the structure they come from, it's something like this, these things are actually room heaters. So you can have them, if you have enough money, constructed in a way that the actual fire is not even underneath the heater, it's not even in the same room. It's connected through a wall to the actual structure here. They're full of fire bricks. If you fire them up, they stay warm for a very, very long time. They'll stay warm for 7 or 8 hours even once you stop firing them. So essentially they are very exclusive room heaters. So somebody in the area was quite well off in that period. Other people were also importing very high status pottery from the Mediterranean. And here, this is broken up, but you can see it's the base of the dish. Valencian lusterware, so this dates 1425, 1475, somewhere around there. And the IHS monogram is a very common Christian motif still used today, deriving from the Greek spelling of Christ's name. So again, we can look at this and go, well, we found some rather grotty pots, even if this one has some particular interest, which we obviously very rarely do as archaeologists, then you might be looking at something like this. So this is a very splendid piece of ceramic indeed. And again, it's only people who have certain means are going to be able to afford to bring these things into the country. We're on the main road to Colchester, as I said earlier. And there are recorded inns. They're shown on maps dating from 17th, 18th century onwards. And it may well be that the situation along Whitechapel High Street, similar to crossing the bridge, London Bridge into Southwark, that you're not allowed to go over the bridge and into the city at night time. And it's quite possible that you weren't allowed to get through Aldgate at night time either, which would mean you would quite possibly stop your journey there and wait till the daylight came to move in, or quite possibly, to avoid the traffic going through the gate, you'd go outside of the gate at night time and then start your actual journey onward early in the morning. We found a great deal of spurs. We have 7 or 8 complete examples. Most of these are medieval or Tudor. They're rail spurs or prick spurs like these ones, which just look a bit like corroded pieces of metal. However, if you x-ray them, it turns out that some of them are very finely inlaid indeed. And this is probably a later example from the 17th century, around the time of the Civil War. We have so many buildings on the site. Later impacts have removed a great deal of what was once there. I could say might have been there, but clearly we have got some quite nice building remains dating to the 17th century. These particular examples were on top of the quarries, which we were looking at earlier. So by that point, obviously they have been backfilled. People have built above them. However, if you look at the state of some of these bits of floor, they're sloping quite considerably, and that's a result of quarries underneath compacting down in the course of time. So we have pieces of brick floor here. We've got a little alleyway between 2 walls, and over here, some pitched tiles, which were often used as hearths. Here's another view, so you can get quite a nice view of the alleyway. Or bits of floor over there, more pieces of 17th century wall, possibly even 16th century, some of these down here. Some of the foundations have got plenty of stone and chalk in them rather than just brick. So we can say by the middle of the 17th century, the southern part of the site has been built over, and the urban spread is going north from the main road on Whitechapel High Street. So yeah, we've got plenty of high status pottery, among that German stoneware, a lot of German stoneware, but that's not unusual when you get to the 17th century. You can see this is really nicely molded. It's a very fine piece of pottery in its production. But again, in itself, it may not look particularly impressive, but it would have been once part of something like this. So this tankard was produced again in the early 17th century, and in this case, it's got depictions of all the electors of Holy Roman Empire around the centre of it. We may not have had anything quite that grand, but still, these things are not everyday objects, clearly. And here's one of our finer archaeologists contemplating why he's found all these Bartman jugs, more commonly known as Bellamines, although that's actually a misnomer. But they're commonly used serving alcohol, And all of these came out of the same brick-lined cesspit over on the east side of the site, which is closest to the location of the inn. So we may have actually found one of the outbuildings or the backyard of one of the inns, either the Nag's Head or the Green Dragon. There's still a pub called the Nag's Head there now, still exists to this day. And here they are, cleaned up, some of them, photographed in a rather more genteel environment back in our office rather than on site. So now, if we move into the 18th century, you can see over here we've got Nag's Head Stable Yard, Green Dragon Inn. This is Brick Lane and Bell Yard, which was, I believe, named after another inn. The red line is the outline of our site, and here in the middle we've still got the alleyway, which we saw on Morgan's map earlier on, and now it's been marked as Tanner's Row. But over here, you can see we have sugar bakers, and that turns out to be another industry which is quite prominent in the local area. We also have evidence of glass manufacturing. This is part of a large heavy crucible which we recovered during the excavation. Lots of fragments of glass from waste from glass production. Most of this dates to the 17th and 18th century periods. But something we didn't recognise on site were these things, which are just pieces of fired clay. So people have collected them, and most of the time when they were collected, people thought they were bits of building material. So they've been collected up, put in with the building material, and then our specialist who looked at them came and spoke to me and said, "What are these? They're not bits of building material." I said, "Well, I don't know, but they're probably part of some kind of industrial manufacturing process." So we went away and asked somebody who did know, and they told us what they were. They're pieces of bell bar. And there are quite a few of them. We have a few pieces of space bar and things like that which we use in bell production as well. Bell making is an industry which Aldgate and Whitechapel was famous for over hundreds of years. And indeed, here are bells which were made in Whitechapel in the late 19th century. But some of you might know, there is the building which was the latest bell foundry is still there on Whitechapel High Street. It's a Grade 2 listed building, although people are trying to get it knocked down and redeveloped, which is unfortunate. So yeah, and that foundry closed in 2017, so it's only a few years ago. So other industries we might have represented. In the northern part of the site particularly, we started finding pits which weren't just quarries, they had been lined with timber to obviously support the sides and keep them open. That isn't something you'd normally do if you just wanted to extract sand and gravel. So, you know, there's probably another reason for that. If you want to keep them open, well, one of the very obvious things you could go for there as an interpretation is that they're used in the tanning industry. Given that we have the cartographic evidence to suggest that the middle of the site and the northern part of the site were used in that way in the 18th century, these things probably fit in quite well with that. None of the pits we found actually date quite that late, but they do, but the middle of the late 17th century when they're being backfilled somewhere, that certainly is the case. Here you can see this is a section cut through one of these pits. That's a plank we've sawn through, part of the timber lining. Down here we've got a lot of organic material, possibly deriving from its use as a tanning pit. And up here, this whole mass of roof tile. which is demolition debris used to fill in the top. So all of this obviously is looks quite professional, and it's all very controlled. But actually, that's what we were doing at the time, which doesn't look quite so much fun. Obviously, it is actually safe, but I got to know the dig driver up there very well. He was a very very good machine driver, and very sensible. And he is far enough away from where we are, but obviously all of this looks a bit of a mess compared to the pictures which we normally go around showing people, should we say. Sugar production is also a prominent local industry. We just saw on Rogue's map a couple of sugar bakers shown over on the west side of the main road, Brick Lane. This is part of the sugar cone, which is actually upside down compared to the way it should be used. They're quite, they're quite common finds. They're not that unusual, but in this case, it fits in quite nicely with the story of local development at the site. And this is actually how they're used, pretty much. So you turn, they're inverted. The hole goes in the bottom. You stick a rag in it to stop everything just going through, and you put your cane syrup into your cone or mould. Let it drain out. Let it dry out a bit. And then you probably make it whiter by getting rid of the impurities, by putting a few more things with the sugar, let it dry out again. Then you turn the thing out, you've got a cone-shaped piece of raw sugar, and then you bake it to dry the thing out completely. And then you actually sell the cone as it is. They come in different sizes, so and they will break up the loaves as well. They're known as sugar loaves, these things. So they get broken up as well and sold in smaller pieces. But yeah, we look at these things and kind of know what they are and how they're used, but many people don't. So by the time we get to the late 19th century and our 1875 Ordnance Survey map, we have this sugar refinery shown on the site. And by this point, somebody has changed the street map down here. In the late 18th century, somebody decided that access to the top bit of Brick Lane up there from Whitechapel High Street wasn't good enough. So they compulsorily purchased the buildings on this side of the road between what was Brick Lane and Bell Lane. They were all demolished, and some of the sugar bakers may have just moved across the road from over here to over here. But by this point, they weren't just using small molds. They had a very large premises which burnt down several times, rebuilt several times. And by the time we get to 1875, the sugar refinery is a very large building indeed. Although it actually closed that year for whatever reason. It clearly becomes uneconomic for people to do that. And this site actually becomes the headquarters of Victoria Wine. It's a large warehouse. It's got a very large area, 9 stories, and room out the back as well, so you can expand it a bit further. Yeah, this doesn't look a great deal of fun. That is actually the back wall of the sugar refinery, and there would have been a very large chimney just down here in this corner. Again, we have the constraints of construction. We didn't excavate particularly deeply in this area, but the engineers who oversee the work insisted on having these massive braces all the way across the area when we were digging this out. So these had to be constructed, they had to be put in sections, joined together, bolted together. And then we finished our excavation, and to allow machine access into this area to get rid of the rest of the obstructions, these things all had to be taken away. And then when they were going to dig down further, they had to be put back in place. So that was a lot of work for a lot of people. So the sugar refinery continues for quite some period, and then it gets demolished pretty spectacularly in one go. That's the chimney, and amazingly enough, that's the only piece of the building which survived being bombed in World War II. That's Whitechapel High Street down there. So you can see this entire block pretty much has been completely obliterated. And that is the remnant of St Mary's Church, just on the south side of Whitechapel High Street. And that's what the church looked like in 1941. All rather too reminiscent of certain events taking place in the world today, unfortunately. On a brighter note, this is a tiny, tiny object. You can see that's 5mm scale there. So this bone die came from a pit which was probably excavated around 1600, although the die itself could be earlier, it might even be Roman. Nobody can demonstrate that one way or another. But you might see there are 5 holes on this side. There are also 5 holes on that side. So anybody who's got two dice and is trying to throw lucky 7 has got a better chance with our loaded die. So finally, archaeology is just about people who do the work. And these are the people who did the work. It's my team. And one of the things you have to do on a large construction site is practice your evacuation procedures every now and again. So this was a fire alarm, not a real fire alarm, luckily. And off the top of it, I happened to be there at the time. So we took some photographs whilst we had that opportunity. So there we are. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.